JBS presents a television exclusive, The Dershow with Alan Dershowitz.
Today is the first full day of the Biden presidency, and I have a homework assignment for all of my listeners, especially those who voted against Joe Biden, who voted for Donald Trump. Call me and tell me what Joe Biden can do to persuade you that he really means it when he says, we want to bring our country together. Enough division, too much division. We're a better country when we're united. That's your homework assignment, and I'll explain why on The Dershow. Today, on the very first day of Joe Biden's term as President of the United States, the first full day, I am posing a challenge to my viewers and listeners. Yes, to my viewers and listeners. I know that a lot of you are Trump supporters. I know that a lot of you are conservatives and Republicans. I know some of you are liberals, some of you are Democrats, but from the calls I've gotten, a lot of my viewers are conservatives. A lot of them supported President Trump, and a lot of them oppose President Biden. So here's my challenge to you, to my listeners and viewers. You heard President Biden yesterday in his inauguration speech call for unity. Fox called it a hollow call for unity, and, other critics said it was a fake call for unity. I didn't see it that way. It looked to me like a genuine call to try to bring people together. I've known Joe Biden for 40 years. He's that kind of guy. He was the guy who always crossed the aisle. He was the guy, remember, he was criticized for talking to segregationists and making deals with bigots in the Senate. Yeah, he did that. That's who he is. He will try to bring people together. Will he succeed? I don't know. But here's my challenge to my listeners, particularly my conservative, anti-Biden, pro-Trump listeners. Tell me, call me, tell me, what do you think Joe Biden can do to make his call for unity and bringing people together a reality? What can he do to persuade you that he's serious? What can he do to convince you that he is going to be the president for all Americans? He went out of his way to say to those who voted against him, some of you who voted against him, give me an opportunity. Keep your mind open. Let's hear from you. Let me know what you think I can do, he said, essentially, to heal the nation and to bring them together. Let me tell you what I plan to do. Now, I'm a liberal Democrat. You know that. And I was not a political supporter of President Trump, though I defended him on the floor of the Senate and will continue to oppose these foolish efforts to impeach and remove him after he's left office, efforts which I think hurt the Democratic Party as much as they do the Republican Party, and certainly help hurt President Biden's agenda by diverting attention from the future and looking back to the past. But let me tell you what I intend to do. I intend to write a letter to my old friend Joe Biden. I intend to offer my help and say, look, I have some credibility with conservatives. I have some credibility with people who voted against you and with people who voted for President Trump. I have some credibility because I stood up for the Constitution, and standing up for the Constitution, I stood up for the rights of President Trump, not to be impeached the first time around, not to be removed, and not to be removed the second time around. This time I'm not going to be his official lawyer, but I will certainly make the case in the court of public opinion. So, Mr. President Biden, I have some credibility, and I'm offering myself up to help you bring about this kind of unity, to end this kind of divisiveness. I'm happy to try to appeal to people who hold me in high regard because of what I did neutrally during the past 4 years, especially during the past year. So here, I want to help. I want to bring this country together. Yeah, I'm going to remain a Democrat. At least I'm going to remain a Democrat as long as the Democrats remain Democrats. If the Democrats become extreme left-wingers, a la the Squad, I'm not going to any longer be able to be a Democrat. But I'm a Biden Democrat, basically. I'm a Clinton Democrat. I'm a Ted Kennedy Democrat. I supported all of those candidates. I'm a mainstream centrist Democrat, liberal Democrat, anti-radical. I'm more opposed to radicals on the left than I am to conservatives. I'm even more opposed to racist, white supremacists, bigots, extremists on the right. But I oppose all extremism. I'm a centrist, liberal Democrat. And so, President Biden, how can I help? I'd like all of you to respond to that call as well. Look, when we elect a new president, when Donald Trump was elected 4 years ago, I didn't vote for him. I voted for Hillary Clinton. But I wished him well immediately. And I said, I'm rooting for you. I always root for the incumbent president, whether I voted for him or her or against them. I root for our president. I want to see our nation successful. This morning, before I did my show today, the Dershow, I was on Russian television talking to their main channel. And they asked me what can be done to create closer relationships between Russia and the United States. And I pointed out the problems. I said, problems won't go away. The problems over Ukraine won't go away. The problems in Syria won't go away. There are a lot of problems that will continue to exist. But I think Joe Biden is going to try his best to reset the relationship between the United States and Russia. I think he's going to see China as the biggest competitor and perhaps create closer ties between the United States and Russia in a united front against China. I think he's also going to try to improve relations with China. That's who he is. He's not a separator and a divider. He's a uniter. Now, there's a time for separation and division. We have to separate ourselves from the bigotry. We have to separate ourselves from hate. We have to separate ourselves from countries who are thinking ill of us and want to do us harm, like Iran. I don't know what his policy is going to be toward Iran. We heard from Secretary of State designate Blinken that we're not jumping back into the Iran deal so quick. We want to make sure that the new Iran deal, if we would enter into it, is longer and stronger. I love those two words, longer. It has to exist at least for a quarter of a century, maybe longer. And stronger, it has to provide for real inspection, real ability to stop Iran from developing a nuclear arsenal. Because I have to tell you, as I've said here on the show before, Iran, they ought to know this, they will never develop a nuclear arsenal. Why? Because Israel will do whatever it has to stop that from happening. Can you blame them? A country of Holocaust survivors where 6 million of their parents and grandparents and uncles and aunts were murdered by Nazis because Jews didn't have power and strength. Can you blame a country for saying, we're not going to allow a neighboring country that has sworn to destroy us, that has promised to blow up Tel Aviv because Israel's a one-bomb nation? Can you blame Israel for taking whatever steps is necessary, whether it includes assassinating scientists, technological warfare involving computers, or an actual military attack? I guarantee you Israel will never allow, no matter who the president of the United States is, no matter who the prime minister of Israel is, Israel will never allow Iran to develop nuclear weapons. And I think Iran ought to understand that. And I think the United States ought to understand that. And I'm anxiously waiting to see what the policy of the Biden administration is going to be. I think Tony Blinken has the right approach. I'm worried about Wendy Sherman. She's number 2 in the State Department. She's the one who made the deal, who wrote the terrible, terrible Iran deal 4 or 5 years ago. So I'm nervous about that. But nervousness doesn't mean necessarily criticism now. I keep an open mind. So I want to hear from you. What do you think he can do? What steps can he take to move closer and bring us all together as a nation? What issues can he focus on about which there is consensus, about which every American agrees? Let me propose one or two. I'm sure there'll be some disagreement. The environment. The environment affects us all. Climate change affects us all. No, there are some climate change deniers. I'm not talking to you, the climate change deniers, the people who think there's no such thing as climate change. Of course there is. Every scientist will tell you there is. There'll be a disagreement as to how much human factors influence it and how much it's a natural phenomenon that occurs. You can have some disagreements as to matters of degree, but we do experience climate change. The planet is in trouble. You don't have to believe the extreme view that we'll come to an end in so-and-so years unless we reduce carbon, whatever. You don't have to agree with all of that, but I think everybody agrees that it would be a good thing to slow down the environmental damage that's occurring. Now, on the other side, you don't want to lose a lot of jobs. So there was a big dispute over whether we should be in the Paris Climate Accords or not. President Trump took a view that China wasn't doing its job, other countries weren't doing their job, that all the burden fell on us. We are a great consumer and producer of carbon and environmental pollution. We're not nearly as bad as some other countries, but we're not so good. But the argument that the Trump administration made is too much of the burden's on us, too little of the burden's on China and other countries, and it will take away too many jobs. Okay, if you were advising President Biden about how to deal with the climate, what would you say to him? You wouldn't say don't do anything, and you wouldn't say end all of industry and stop all of everything we're doing to preserve the environment. Some balance has to be struck. I'm not a scientist, so I don't know the details of fracking and coal and all of that. But what is it you would tell him to do? What is it you would tell him to do about immigration? Again, I think we have a consensus about some aspects of immigration. We are a nation of immigrants. I would not be here today running the Dershow if my grandparents, great-grandparents in my case, hadn't made the decision to come to the United States at the end of the 19th century on one side of my family, the beginning of the 20th century on the other side of my family. We are a nation of immigrants, and I think everybody understands that we renew the lifeblood of this country when we bring in immigrants who help the country. We've had immigration in this country that has actually boosted the levels of accomplishment, tremendous contributions that immigrants have made to this country. Some of the greatest Americans have been immigrants. So I think we all want more immigration, more lawful immigration. But what do we do with the millions of people who are in this country today without documentation? What do we do with their children who were brought here when they were 1 or 2 years old, or who were born here? They're citizens. What do we do when you have children who are citizens, but their parents are not? These are complicated problems that President Biden wants to confront. I hope he confronts it in a way that brings us together. So call me and tell me how you think he should solve the problem of immigration. And don't tell me build walls. Okay, you can have your walls. Those are symbolic. What do you do with the millions of people who are here? Walls will just keep them in, not keep them out. What do you do with DACA? What do you do with our real problems? What do you do with the relationship between immigration and employment? These are complicated problems that we can solve better if we are united than if we're divided. What do we do with China? We know China cheats. We know that China doesn't play by the rules. On the other hand, China will soon perhaps surpass us as being the most powerful economy in the world. China is a brilliant country. The Chinese culture goes back Confucius and beyond that. We should be trying to work together with them to solve the world's problems. We don't need, there used to be a time when you thought you needed an enemy. You couldn't be really a country if you didn't have an enemy. We had enemies all throughout our history, starting with the British. They were our enemies, the War of 1812. We then had our own enemies, as Pogo said. We have found the enemy, and it is us. During the Civil War, we were our enemy, and we fought this horrible Civil War. Then we had these other wars, the Spanish-American War. We had the First World War. We had enemies. We had the Second World War, a grievous, horrible enemy. Then the Korean War, and then the Vietnam War. Now we're in kind of pseudo-wars. We don't need enemies. I would hope Joe Biden would bring us 4 years of peace, 4 years of stability and tranquility. Bill Clinton once complained that his 8 years, there were no crises, and he couldn't prove what a great president he would have been had there been a crisis. All of our great presidents, obviously, have presided over crises. George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, all presided over crises. There's supposed to be an old Chinese curse. I never know if it's true or not. May you live in interesting times. We don't need that curse today. My blessing for America for the next 4 years is may you live in boring times. May it be less interesting. May there be less conflict. Maybe we can just have a period of boring, predictable stability, normalcy. We need it. When you come out of surgery, you don't go and do your exercise right away. You rest, you relax, you get better. We've been through surgery. We're going through it now. Even the pandemic, which you would have thought would unite us, has divided us. Masks, yes, no. Vaccines, how quickly will they roll out? State, federal, government, whose fault is it? Why are people dying? Who are we going to blame? Let's unite. Let's try to roll out the vaccine as quickly as possible. Let's agree with the priorities, who goes first, who goes second. Let's try to fight this pandemic as a united country. We don't need division. We don't need excitement. We don't need drama. We need boring, consistent normalcy. And I'm not suggesting Joe Biden's a boring guy compared to Donald Trump. He's a boring guy. Compared to Donald Trump, everybody's a boring guy. But Trump lost the election. And we opted, both in the popular vote and the electoral vote, for a more centrist, more consistent, less dramatic candidate. And so, again, my challenge to you, my listeners, maybe I'll devote a whole show just to getting your points of view on this. I'll start out with a small introduction, but take maybe a lot of phone calls and comments, because I want you to tell me, particularly you who voted against Biden and who voted for Trump, tell me what Biden can do to bring us together, what Biden can do to persuade you to give him a chance. And I will get that information to President Biden. I will get it to him through people I know in his administration or through him directly. Just you tell me what he can do to persuade you. I'm not asking you to tell me what he can do to persuade you to become a Democrat or to vote for him for re-election. I'm not talking politics. I'm asking for you to tell me what he can do that will persuade you that he means it, as he's persuaded me that he means it, when he says he wants to bring us together, he wants to heal us, he wants to reduce the differences and the tensions, he wants us to listen to each other. I would hope he would have said as well, and he implied it, but he didn't say it as strongly as I hoped he would, and we should not shut down the marketplace of ideas. Let's not censor each other. Let's not have the social media put people on blacklists, take them off the platform. Let's end that form of division by censorship. If we're going to listen to each other, we have to have an opportunity to hear each other. Put President Trump back on Twitter. Put him back on Facebook. If you don't like what he says, argue with him. Condemn him. Do whatever you want, but he's now a private citizen. And he's entitled to get his message out just the way we're entitled to get our messages out. So let's end this social media censorship. Let's end this cancel culture. Let's end this McCarthyism that we're going through, which divides even more. Let's stop these petitions to take degrees away from people who may have supported President Trump or worked on his administration. That's not going to bring us together. That's going to divide us. And let's end this foolish impeachment and trial. That's looking backward, not looking forward. That's just going to divide us more. If I were President Biden, I would have said, I don't support this. I don't support this impeachment. I don't support this trial. It hurts my cause. It hurts my agenda. It hurts me from moving forward. It takes my 100 days away from me and gives it back to President Trump, now former President Trump. So both sides have something to do. But today my message is to President Trump supporters. Tomorrow I'll have a message for the Democrats. I can combine them together. I know what the Democrats have to do to bring us together. They have to stop this foolish drive toward impeachment and removal. That's the first thing they have to do. They have to stop these efforts to try to take degrees away from people and stop people from speaking on campus and recriminations. They have to remember Abraham Lincoln, with malice toward none and charity to all. We heard that last night from several people. It is one of the most remarkable phrases in the lexicon of American history, with malice toward none and charity to all. Democrats, you beat them. You won. You have your president. Stop it. Stop the recriminations. Stop trying to go back to the past. Move forward. That's what you can do. And now I want to hear from the pro-Trump, anti-Biden people, voters. What can Biden do to now bring us together, to persuade you that he means it when he says that we are stronger as a nation when we are together than we are when we're divided? So you have homework. Your homework is call me, leave a message, leave a question, leave a comment, but be constructive. Tell me, don't complain. We've had enough complaining. Tell me in a positive way what Joe Biden can do to help heal the country and to persuade you that he really means it when he says he wants unity rather than division. So that's your homework assignment. I want all of you to get A pluses. Please call the Dershow. Let's begin with our first call today.
My question has to do with your statement on a previous show where you discussed Biden being a centrist candidate. For the most part, I agree with this. However, I've noticed the executive action being discussed that Biden will take on ordering a whole-of-government racial equity review, which will be led by Domestic Policy Council Director Susan Rice, which will require each department to conduct a baseline review of whether its policies disadvantage a demographic group, with the goal of achieving the option to, quote, more equitably allocate federal resources. I just noticed over the last several years that identity politics is running rampant in the Democratic Party, and Biden has engaged in this with his past statements. My question is, how concerned are you that he or Kamala Harris will enact policies that claim to be about equality, but actually disfavor certain groups based off the assumption and generalization that any disparity equates to systemic inequity, basically leading to equity or quality of outcome policies? Do you think this is the direction we're going in as a country? Does the executive branch have the authority to enact policies like this? What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear it. Thank you so much.
Great question. And of course, the answer is going to be a matter of degree. I think we all want equality. Let me be very clear. I've said this before. We are not a systemically racist country. We are a systemically anti-racist country. What do I mean by that? Systemically, everything is opposed to racism. The government's opposed to racism. Our universities are opposed to racism. Our media is opposed to racism. Black Lives Matter is the most prominent and popular brand and organization in America. Systemically, we're very anti-racist as compared to when I grew up, where we were a systemically racist country, where there was legal discrimination before Brown versus Board of Education, before the Civil Rights Law. Systemically, we've moved away from racism. Systemically, we're anti-racist. There's still too much racism in this country. There's still too much racism by individuals, but the racists don't win. They don't get the support of the system. The system is opposed to racism, and what we're seeing is the system under President Biden moving even more away from what would be called systemic racism and towards systemic anti-racism. We have a lot of work to do because there's far too much racism in this country. There's racism, particularly against people of color, but there's all kinds of racism. We have too many bigots in this country. There are too many anti-Catholic people. There are too many anti-Jewish people. There are too many anti-Hispanic people. There are too many anti-Black people. There are too many anti-Asian people. We do have systemic racism against Asian Americans in many American universities. That is systemic, and I think that will be proved in lawsuits that are going around the country today. So we have to be careful how we use the word systemic. It could have two meanings. One, that it's pervasive. Well, yeah, it is pervasive. So we might say, in that respect, it's systemic. I don't think that's what systemic means. To me, systemic means, does it come from the top? Does it come from the top down? Is it imposed by the government? And the answer is no. From the top down, we have systemic anti-racism. It's from the bottom up that we have continuing racism. You know, when I was a student at Yale Law School, there was systemic anti-Semitism. It was systemic. I was first in my class, editor-in-chief of the Law Journal, going to be a Supreme Court law clerk. I got turned down by 32 out of 32 Wall Street firms. They all practiced systemic anti-Semitism. That was part of the system. When I went to complain to the dean of Yale Law School, he said, hey, that's the system we live in. We have essentially an apartheid legal system. We have the WASP firms, the Jewish firms, the Catholic firms. There was no room for women, African Americans, openly gay people. That was systemic bigotry. That's over. And what we have now are very great pockets of bigotry of all kinds, white supremacy, all of that. But it's not systemic. It's anti-systemic. I would argue that within our criminal justice system, maybe one can argue there is some still remnants of systemic racism in the sense that so many more people of color are convicted, tried, charged than the proportion of people who commit crimes. And the system is biased against people of color in the criminal justice system. But we're moving away from that. And the trend is clearly in the right direction. And what we're seeing, I think, with the Biden administration is an attempt to remedy the remnants of, and the deep remnants of racism. Maybe they'll go too far. Maybe they'll introduce identity politics. Maybe affirmative action based on race will operate at every element of the government. I hope not. I hope the goal is equality of opportunity rather than equality of outcome. But we'll wait and see. Great question. Thank you.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, Post Office Box 360, Stamford, Connecticut 06904. Or you can call the JBS Pledge Line at 833-MY-JBS-TV. That's 833-695-2788. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. We thank you for your kind support.